One of the most painful truths about avoidant attachment is that the harder you try to hold on, the faster they seem to pull away. Many people enter relationships believing that more effort, more communication, and more reassurance will create more closeness. But with an avoidant person, this often has the opposite effect. Avoidants deeply value their sense of freedom and emotional independence. When they feel someone constantly seeking reassurance, demanding answers, or pushing for deeper commitment before they feel ready, their nervous system can interpret it as pressure rather than love. Even if your intentions are pure, they may experience your pursuit as a threat to their autonomy. As a result, they create distance, not always because they don't care, but because they feel overwhelmed. This creates a frustrating cycle. The more distance they create, the more anxious their partner becomes. The more anxious the partner becomes, the more they chase. And the more they chase, the more the avoidant withdraws. Both people end up trapped in a dance that neither of them truly wants. What changes everything is when you stop chasing. This does not mean becoming cold, playing games, or pretending you don't care. It means reclaiming your own emotional center. It means understanding that your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to stay close. When you stop trying to force connection, you create space for something much more powerful: choice. Ironically, many avoidants begin to feel safer when they are no longer being pursued. The pressure disappears, the expectation fades. For the first time, they have room to move toward the relationship on their own terms. And that is often the moment they begin to see you differently, not as someone demanding love, but as someone secure enough to give it freely. True attraction grows where pressure ends. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop chasing and let your presence speak louder than your pursuit. One of the most attractive qualities to an avoidant person is emotional independence. This doesn't mean you don't need anyone, suppress your feelings, or pretend to be completely self sufficient. It means that your sense of worth, peace, and happiness does not depend entirely on another person's attention, validation, or presence. Many people unknowingly make a relationship the center of their world. They begin monitoring every text message, analyzing every interaction, and basing their mood on how available the other person is. While this may come from a genuine desire for connection, avoidants often experience this level of emotional dependence as pressure. They can feel responsible for emotions they don't know how to manage, which causes them to retreat even further. Emotional independence breaks this pattern. When you have your own goals, passions, friendships, and purpose, you bring a different energy into the relationship. You are not constantly asking, "Do you love me?" because your value is not up for debate. You are not desperately seeking reassurance because you have already learned to trust yourself. Instead of needing the relationship to complete you, you choose the relationship from a place of wholeness. This shift is powerful because avoidants are often highly sensitive to emotional pressure. When they encounter someone who is grounded, confident, and emotionally stable, they feel less trapped and more free to connect. They begin to see a relationship not as a burden, but as a safe space where both people can remain themselves. The greatest irony is that many people become most attractive to an avoidant when they stop making the avoidant the center of their emotional universe. They focus on their growth, they invest in their purpose, they create a life that feels meaningful with or without the relationship, and that confidence is impossible to ignore. When an avoidant sees that your happiness is not dependent on their approval, something changes. They begin to respect you differently. They see strength instead of neediness, confidence instead of fear, and value instead of desperation. Often, that is the moment they start wondering if they have finally found someone truly special, someone they could see as the one. Many people believe that love is built through dramatic gestures, intense emotions, and unforgettable moments. Movies, social media, and romantic fantasies often teach us that passion is the ultimate proof of connection. But when it comes to avoidant individuals, intensity is not usually what makes them stay. In fact, too much intensity too quickly can make them feel overwhelmed and cause them to pull away. Avoidants are often cautious about emotional closeness. Deep down, many of them have learned to associate vulnerability with discomfort, pressure, or loss of independence. Because of this, they are less likely to trust someone who comes on very strong in the beginning. Grand declarations of love, constant emotional discussions, or pushing for immediate commitment may feel exciting to some people. But to an avoidant, it can feel like being swept into something they are not emotionally prepared for. What they often respond to instead is consistency. Consistency means showing up as the same person day after day. It means being honest, reliable, and emotionally steady. It means your actions match your words. You don't disappear when things get difficult, and you don't become overly reactive when challenges arise. You create an environment where trust can slowly develop. For an avoidant, consistency feels safe because it removes uncertainty. They begin to realize that they don't have to constantly defend themselves or prepare for emotional chaos. They learn that the connection is not based on temporary excitement, but on genuine stability. Over time, this steady presence becomes incredibly powerful. While intense emotions can fade, consistency builds trust, and trust is often the foundation that allows an avoidant to lower their walls. Eventually, they begin to see something rare in you. They see someone who is not trying to rush the relationship, force intimacy, or create drama. They see someone who remains grounded regardless of circumstances. That kind of emotional stability stands out in a world filled with unpredictability. And for many avoidants, it is not intensity that makes them believe someone is the one. It is the quiet confidence of a person who shows up consistently, loves steadily, and proves through actions, not words, that they are safe to trust. That is what makes an avoidant stop running and start staying. One of the biggest misconceptions about love is that being endlessly available will make someone value you more. Many people believe that if they give enough time, enough patience, and enough understanding, the other person will eventually recognize their worth. But with avoidant individuals, the opposite is often true. What earns their respect is not unlimited access, it is healthy boundaries. Avoidants are often used to relationships where people overextend themselves in an attempt to gain closeness. They may encounter partners who ignore their own needs, tolerate inconsistent behavior, or sacrifice their self respect just to keep the relationship alive. While this level of accommodation may seem loving, it can unintentionally communicate that the person does not value themselves enough to set limits. Boundaries change the entire dynamic. A boundary is not a punishment, it is not an ultimatum. It is a clear expression of self respect. It says, I care about you, but I also care about myself. It communicates that your time, energy, emotions, and well being matter. You are willing to love someone, but you are not willing to lose yourself in the process. This is incredibly important because avoidants often pay close attention to how people treat themselves. When they see someone constantly abandoning their own needs to keep a relationship, they may unconsciously lose respect for the connection. But when they see someone who remains kind while maintaining firm standards, something shifts. They begin to recognize that this person cannot be controlled through distance, mixed signals, or emotional inconsistency. They realize that your self-worth does not depend on their approval, and that realization can be powerful. Healthy boundaries also remove the pressure that often exists in avoidant relationships. Instead of chasing, pleading, or demanding, you calmly communicate what you will and will not accept. You stop trying to force someone to choose you and start choosing yourself. Ironically, this is often when an avoidant begins to see your true value. They understand that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. They realize that losing you is a real possibility. And when an avoidant sees someone who respects themselves enough to walk away from unhealthy dynamics, they often develop a deeper level of admiration. Because true love is not about sacrificing your identity to keep someone close. It is about standing in your worth, honoring your boundaries, and showing others how you expect to be treated. That kind of strength is unforgettable, and it is often what makes an avoidant stop running and start paying attention. One of the most transformative things you can do in any relationship, especially with an avoidant person, is to heal the wounds that make you fear losing them. This may sound surprising because most people focus on changing the avoidant. They spend countless hours trying to understand their behavior, earn their commitment, or convince them to open up. But the real breakthrough often happens when you turn that attention inward and begin healing yourself. Many relationships between anxious and avoidant individuals follow a predictable pattern. The anxious partner fears abandonment and seeks reassurance. The avoidant partner fears being overwhelmed and creates distance. One person chases, the other retreats. One asks for more closeness, the other asks for more space. Over time, both people become exhausted, frustrated, and emotionally drained. The problem is that each person's fear unintentionally triggers the other's fear. When you carry unhealed wounds, whether from childhood, past relationships, rejection, or betrayal, you may begin looking to another person to provide the security you have not yet learned to give yourself. Their texts determine your mood. Their attention determines your confidence. Their distance feels like proof that something is wrong with you. But healing changes everything. When you begin addressing your own fears, you stop reacting from panic and start responding from wisdom. You no longer need constant reassurance to feel valuable. You no longer interpret every moment of distance as rejection. Instead, you develop an inner sense of stability that remains intact regardless of what another person does. This shift is powerful because it breaks the unhealthy cycle. The avoidant is no longer being chased, and you are no longer living in a state of emotional survival. The relationship gains room to breathe. More importantly, healing helps you see the relationship clearly. You stop viewing the avoidant as someone you must win over and begin seeing them as a human being with their own fears, limitations, and struggles. You stop trying to rescue them, fix them, or force them to change. You simply show up as your healthiest self, and that energy is deeply attractive. When an avoidant encounters someone who has done their inner work, they often feel a sense of calm they are not used to experiencing. There is less pressure, less drama, and less emotional chaos. Instead, there is confidence, patience, and authenticity. The truth is that the moment you stop seeking another person to heal your wounds is often the moment you become most capable of experiencing healthy love. Whether the avoidant stays or leaves, you remain whole. And that wholeness is what ultimately stops the cycle and creates the possibility for a deeper, more genuine connection. One of the greatest paradoxes in relationships with avoidant people is this: the more you try to prove your value, the less they are able to see it. Many people believe that if they love harder, give more, explain themselves better, or constantly demonstrate how loyal and caring they are, the avoidant will finally recognize their worth. But in reality, constantly trying to earn someone's appreciation often has the opposite effect. When you are always proving yourself, you unconsciously communicate that your value is still up for debate. Your actions become driven by a need for validation rather than a genuine expression of who you are. You start working overtime to convince someone that you are worthy of love, attention, and commitment, and without realizing it, you place the power to define your worth in someone else's hands. Avoidants are often highly sensitive to this dynamic. They may not consciously understand it, but they can feel when someone is seeking approval from them. This creates an imbalance in the relationship. Instead of two whole people choosing each other, one person is trying to earn what should never have to be earned. Everything changes when you stop proving and start embodying. You stop explaining why you deserve to be loved. You stop overextending yourself to gain attention. You stop performing for acceptance. Instead, you simply live your truth. You pursue your goals. You invest in your growth. You honor your values. You express your love naturally without needing a specific response in return. This kind of authenticity is incredibly powerful. For an avoidant, it removes pressure from the relationship. They no longer feel like they are being asked to validate someone's identity or emotional worth. Instead, they encounter a person who already knows who they are. A person who is secure enough to love without begging, care without chasing, and walk away if necessary. That confidence is impossible to fake. Over time, the avoidant begins to notice qualities they may have overlooked before. They see your strength, your self respect, your emotional maturity, and your ability to remain grounded regardless of their behavior. They realize that you are not trying to become valuable, you already are. And that realization often hits them when they least expect it. Because true value does not need to announce itself, it does not demand recognition, it does not chase approval, it simply exists. When you stop trying to convince an avoidant that you are special, you give them the opportunity to discover it for themselves. And when that discovery happens naturally, it carries far more weight than anything you could have ever said. That is often the moment they begin to see you not as an option, but as someone truly rare, someone they may never find again. Many people spend years trying to figure out what finally makes an avoidant stop running. They wonder what words to say, what behaviors to change, or what sacrifices to make in order to become the person an avoidant chooses. But the truth is that the moment an avoidant sees someone as the one is rarely caused by pressure, persuasion, or perfection. It happens when they experience a connection that feels safe, genuine, and free from the emotional traps they have spent their lives trying to avoid. Avoidants are often misunderstood. People assume they fear love, but in many cases, they do not fear love itself. They fear losing themselves inside it. They fear expectations they cannot meet, emotional demands they do not know how to handle, and vulnerability that feels overwhelming. Because of these fears, they keep one foot out the door, always ready to retreat when intimacy becomes too intense. But something remarkable happens when they meet someone who is emotionally secure. They encounter a person who does not chase them when they need space, a person who communicates honestly without creating pressure, a person who has healthy boundaries, strong self respect, and a meaningful life outside the relationship. Instead of feeling controlled, they feel accepted. Instead of feeling trapped, they feel free. For perhaps the first time, the avoidant realizes that love does not have to cost them their independence. This realization is powerful because it challenges everything they have come to believe about relationships. They begin to understand that closeness and freedom can exist together. They see that vulnerability does not automatically lead to pain. They discover that a healthy relationship is not about losing themselves, it is about growing alongside someone who respects who they are. And this is often the moment everything changes. The person they once took for granted suddenly appears different. The qualities they overlooked become impossible to ignore. They recognize your consistency, your strength, your patience, and your authenticity. They realize that you were never trying to control them. You were simply offering a healthy connection. At that point, the avoidant no longer sees you as just another relationship. They see you as someone rare, someone who challenged them to grow without forcing them, someone who loved them without abandoning themselves, someone who remained whole whether they stayed or left. That is what often makes an avoidant see you as the one. Not your ability to chase them, fix them, or save them, but your ability to remain grounded in your own worth while offering a love that feels both safe and free. And when they finally understand that, they stop looking for an escape and start imagining a future.